work life cycle assessments, which might be a new area for many professional accountants. And why are they doing that? To understand the value chain, impacts, dependencies, and indeed then sustainability-related risks and opportunities. Preparers will be identifying material information for reporting to key primary stakeholders. For ISSB, it will be your investors. And assurers, depending on the engagement, will be assessing the work of the other two. And, as we heard from Gabriella about an hour or so ago, she was talking very clearly about the 5 principles of the ISBA code, which are front and centre across all of those roles. And it's really good to see that they've been updated for sustainability, part 5 for independent sustainability assurers, and of course the work of experts. I think I'm probably at time there, so I will stop speaking.
No, really, really helpful. Thank you, Sharon. And I like how you've highlighted that it's not just about the reporting sort of outcome side of it, but actually the whole process starting at identification of risks and opportunities, and how important, I mean, if I paraphrase from that particular reporting guide, it talks about how a professional accountant has never been more important. And that integrated thinking or multi-thinking is really critical as well. Bruce, I'll come to you at IFAC and the work that you've been doing in terms of looking at competencies that accountants need to provide quality sustainability reporting and assurance services. And again, how are you seeing it in terms of the difference between traditional financial reporting and auditing work, and where specifically do we need to upskill ourselves from your perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Shahid, and greetings, everyone. It's great to be with you today. So we've been looking at this through the lens of our international education standards, which maybe not everyone on the call will be familiar with, but what it is essentially a global baseline for accountancy education. And part of what those standards do is to codify learning outcomes that should be achieved at the point at which somebody qualifies as a professional accountant. And so we've been asking the question, do we need to revise those standards to take into account sustainability reporting and assurance? And I think as we've done our outreach and work to support that standard setting activity, the one thing which Sharon alluded to that we picked up again and again was this mindset difference, this mindset shift. And so if we start at the core of where the difference is, it's that shift of mindset. I think then it's important to just acknowledge where some of the differences are between this type of reporting and financial reporting, and absolutely could not agree more with what Sharon had said about those financial reporting and those skills we have form such a strong foundation and base for us to work from. It would be really hard to do this work without that base. But what we can say about some of the differences is just, and we've heard it on the call earlier today, that the idea that so much of this information is forward-looking. It comes with uncertainty. It's hard to measure. One of my colleagues describes part of this mindset shift as we need to get comfortable being uncomfortable, which is not something that you want to. Most auditors would be choosing as a way of being, but that's just part of the reality of this work. And then it's also been mentioned earlier, another key difference is this issue around reporting boundaries. And so suddenly you're not just looking at this organization on its own, but you're looking beyond that, and that has implications on the way you're collecting data and the variety of different people you're going to be working with. So those are some of the kind of core differences that we've been picking up on, and then trying to think about now how do you embed some of the skills that might look a little bit different. Certainly, obviously, there's technical skills, and find the standards and all of that. We need to read, we need to learn, absolutely. But we've been picking up also that it's not just that stuff, and it comes to this idea of that whole process that was mentioned earlier, from identifying risks and opportunities all the way through, and that kind of concept and way of thinking means that, okay, we've got to think differently, like, for example, around business acumen. Our business acumen needs to be amped up because we need to understand how these sustainability factors affect. And I couldn't agree more with what Sharon said about South Africa being at an advantage, particularly because of integrated reporting and corporate governance. I'd add a third, which is just our appreciation for societal issues and how they affect business strategy and business models, and you just can't actually have a business in South African context that's going to be successful if you don't consider those issues. And I think that kind of position is something that is not prevalent around the world and will give many chartered accountants a real advantage, I think, just because of that base. But there's definitely a lot to continue to learn about how environmental factors affect the business and how that works the way through the system. And so just that ability to identify risks, to think about some of those completeness issues that were being mentioned earlier from an assurance perspective takes a certain skill set and a certain understanding of the space that is not core to what we do. The last thing I'll say at this point is just, so business acumen being the one, but then what we've been calling behavioral competence or soft skills, if you prefer that term. This work is requiring us to work with many different people from different disciplines. And we speak a lot about this idea, and David mentioned it earlier, of how you've got some consultants, other service providers doing assurance work, and in some from the profession, and probably the answer really actually involves us being together and working in multidisciplinary teams. And that requires, I know we've worked with people from other disciplines, but not to the extent that's going to be required here. And, we've got our own lingo, we've got our own language, we've got our own way of operating, even on this call. If you had a non-accountant here, they would be wondering what we're on about with a lot of the stuff we say, because we take it for granted. We've got to get better at our communicating within teams, but then also in the way we communicate out to stakeholders. Yes, a lot of this is investor first, but there are many stakeholders who are going to be interested in this information. Can we communicate in more clear, simple language that helps to ultimately support a stakeholder in their decision making? So I'll leave it there. There's other areas around the behavioral side, but I think if you are thinking about your own kind of professional development plan and how you're going to tackle this, absolutely think about the standards. Please read sustainability reports. That's a great way to start as well. Actually, just think of your favorite listed company and look at their sustainability report as it is now, wherever it is, if it's an integrated report or separate thing or wherever it is. Read it, compare it to others, look at what framework they're using. But then long-term, consider how you up your game from a business acumen side, from some of those behavioral issues, and really that message I started with earlier, get comfortable with being uncomfortable and be willing to have that mindset shift to position you well to be effective in this space.
Excellent. Thank you, Bruce. Really practical and, just highlighting how we grow outside of our comfort zone and, connectivity, collaboration, communication. Mohsin, again, on the ground, out at the coalface, excuse the pun, maybe in a South African context, and seeing some of the other broader societal, economic elements as well. Are there any key skills that you want to add that haven't yet been mentioned, or anything that you want to highlight from a practical practitioner's perspective?
Thanks, Shahid. I think Bruce has really, laid it out around getting comfortable with uncomfortable and diversifying how we look at things as traditional auditors. And I think it's important that auditors need to evolve and develop this diverse set of skills to stay relevant. We've always been doing this. We have to stay relevant in order to be effective in what we do and how we give the assurance. So I would just highlight 2 points, right? Is firstly, and this is for the firms as well as individual auditors and assurance practitioners, the auditors need to develop that broad understanding and awareness of the sustainability frameworks. Pick up the sustainability report for your company, your large listed entity. Look at it, try and get an understanding of it. And I think firms should also invest in upskilling programs and include sustainability in their annual training curriculum. We're seeing quite a bit of that coming through from our side. And then also to get that practical experience, talk about multidisciplinary teams. We do have the ESG teams that are, working, and they're multidisciplinary. Accountants, you've got environmental scientists, you've got social specialists. Spend some time in those teams to understand how this thing works on a practical level. And secondly, we've seen how technology has and is still, transforming the financial statement audit process, and rapidly as well, right? AI, etc. So similarly, I think sustainability reporting evolves and it's going to evolve with technology playing a key role in that particular process. So I think what firms should also invest in now and is develop proficiency in the data analytic tools that we have and the techniques to handle these large data sets that are coming out from sustainability information and providing assurances those. And I would say lastly, investing in any other emerging technologies. AI, we've seen blockchain plays a key role in verifying information to deliver that efficient and, more importantly, I think, a quality assurance process. So I think it comes down to that, and I'll just stop there because I know we are struggling with time.
No, extremely useful, Mohsin. And it's interesting how companies, from a reporting perspective, can differentiate and demonstrate more value through the sustainability reporting and telling a story. And similarly, in terms of professional services and a profession as a whole, we could add so much of value through almost diversifying and remaining relevant in this space as well. So I hear you around upskilling and investment. And interesting, you went into technology and a future discussion of the profession and what's happening is incomplete without bringing up the subject of technology. And Sharon, I'm gonna move to you, just listening into what Mohsin has said, and also considering some of the ethical elements that Sarah spoke about in her segment earlier. What implications could the use of emerging technology and AI have for auditors in sustainability assurance engagements, and which competencies should they prioritize in navigating risks and opportunities associated with AI and other emerging tech?
Excellent question. And I think the one thing that I would highlight, and it's something that I was hearing in the earlier discussion, to do all the things that Bruce and Mohsin have correctly talked about, I think we need our professional accountants to be adopting a business partnering mindset, which means getting out of the finance function and into those multidisciplinary teams, including those that teams are focused very much on the tech. And that's something that we pick up quite heavily in two pieces of work that we've got. One is a piece that was released recently with CANZ on audit and tech, and then the other one comes from our head of technology at ACCA, and it's around skills pertaining to data literacy and the use of AI in particular. And I think key messages that really come out of that work are around, tech is really there to support. It's an enabler. It should not replace the human factor. And what I mean by that is when we're thinking about the support, we're thinking about, some of the amazing things that, for example, exist in, so if we take assurance, quantum sampling, for example, you're automatically now in the space of being able to sample at speed and at quantity, as it were. The second thing I think as well are thinking about sort of new technologies, and please don't ask me about the detail of them, but around things like twin tech, for example, where you can actually get a much more sort of virtual reality experience, for want of a better word, to actually test and actually understand, for example, the uncertainties that Bruce was talking about a bit earlier on. So you can play out various scenarios and then test assertions, and then indeed actually, to some extent, create a view on the integrity of the reporting. And that then means that in terms of the human factor, what might you be doing? If you take something that we're all familiar with from an audit perspective, that sort of management letter, the quality of your management letter recommendations, for example, can then improve to say, well, okay, next time round, think about your processes and systems to extract your data around sustainability in XYZ way, thinking about sort of, the control environment. And that, in many respects, will open up kind of that new and further opportunities, particularly in the reporting and the assurance space. Second part of your question was around skills and mindset that you referred to, and I think I would pick up on quite a lot of what was said earlier on. So really around recognising what we've already got and the need to adapt. Something that I'm not sure I did hear in our discussion, but I did hear throughout the day, was that really important to flag and identify the ethical dilemmas that might present in the fact that reporting requirements prior to the alphabet soup that we had, we're running the risk of a mandatory alphabet soup. Therefore, we're still having to navigate different frameworks, and those frameworks are relatively new if you take ESRS and ISSB. Therefore, systems and processes are going to be new, and attitudes to what sustainability reporting entails is also going to be new. So therefore, when you're thinking about technology as well as those factors, you need to be having that professional skepticism, because recognizing that whether it's AI, whether it's twin tech, whether it's quantum sampling, there are going to be judgments that need to be made. And then I think, other things to be thinking about are, building, programming, data analysis skills, having a better understanding of what's sitting in that black box of AI potentially, or machine learning, and then of course all important data governance and management will be things that I think professional accountants and auditors will need to really brush up on where they are. Now, in our guide, we do actually provide some hints and tips as to the types of things to look for from a reporting perspective, which will indeed also be the types of things that you'll be assessing from a assurance perspective as well.
Thank you, Sharon. Really, really useful. And I'm hearing human-led, technology-enabled quality opportunities for quality improvements, and again a focus still on ethics. Just thinking about capacity building and looking, Bruce, at the statistics that David had presented, the trends. In Europe, we're seeing significant regulations now with the CSRD, mandatory reporting, mandatory assurance from day one. And this might give us a glimpse of what the future looks like in terms of regulatory adoption across regions and markets, and essentially what the end game might look like. How would we ensure that we have the capacity across the profession to meet the expected demand for sustainability reporting and assurance services?
So I think the biggest thing here is it is so complex, and there's so many different strands to this, that the first message is we have to work together, and that's working together across stakeholders. I think that's professional bodies, regulators coming together with firms, preparers, educators, everyone kind of being around the table and tackling this problem together, because none of us are going to get there on our own. We sometimes talk in the international space around the sustainability stuff being pre-competitive. This is not, this capacity building effort is not the moment to be competing with each other on who delivers the best education program. It's really the moment to play open cards, to share what we know. The firms share what you have learned so far and be able to make sure that that ends up in university curricula, for example, and it's informing case studies, to make sure that our CPD offerings and so on that are being offered by the professional bodies or by other education providers are reflective of reality, and of what's actually happening in these engagements, and what you all are learning on sustainability assurance engagements, what companies are learning through going through the process of preparing this information. And then just to keep in mind, another reason why this is so complex is that there are so many different people and roles in this. I mean, we spoke about how embedded essentially this all is into everything in the business and in the processes. And so everyone from your junior accountant, bookkeeper kind of person who's going to be helping to collect basic data, some of them won't even be accountants, right? They'll be from other contexts, through to your financial manager kind of level person, all the way up to your CFO, your CEO, those charged with governance. And each of them need to know certain things. They don't need to know the same things, but they need to be prepared for their role in this journey, as do the assurance providers, as do, by the way, the educators themselves. And so that's one of the things that keeps me up at night at the moment, is how do we ensure that, for example, our lecturers are upskilled sufficiently to be able to deliver this training, to deliver this kind of education in the classroom, and recognizing that most of them will never have prepared a sustainability report or done a sustainability assurance engagement. And so it comes back to where I started at the beginning. We need to work together. Those who are actually doing this in practice need to stay really close to our educators and support them as they develop case studies, so those are reflecting reality and emerging practice. Maybe come in and do guest lectures, maybe help deliver the entire course if you can do that voluntarily. Like this is the moment to have all hands on deck, to all work together. And I know in the South African context, this can happen. It's just a question of us coming together and taking it seriously and figuring out how to do it in a way that makes sense. And so huge kudos to URBA for arranging this call, which is just one example of us all coming together to talk about this, and really encourage everyone to keep banging on with us and working together, going on this journey together. It's not a 1-year thing. It's not a 2-year thing. We're going to be figuring out this out for the next 5 to 10 years. So let's get on the journey together, and we'll compete down the road, but not yet.
Yeah. I really like that. Thank you, Bruce. Moving from competing to collaborating, we're all in this together. And just massive, thank you to the panelists for taking out time from your busy schedules today. Neil Morris made the point that when the emissions go up, we don't get a goods received note, for that. But I guess the goods received note might be global warming, and at the end of the day, we're all impacted. So I really do think it's important for everyone across the ecosystem to work together. And again, massive thank you to yourselves. Joyty, I'll be handing back over to you, and I think next time we might need 90 minutes for a session like that. But thank you to the panelists again, and back to you, Joyty.
Thank you, Shahid, for moderating that panel, and to all the panelists. I think it was so interesting to hear, the various competencies that are going to be needed, how this could be, how we all could be better equipped, the technology investments that needed, how it could actually practically be used in these engagements. And I think that is the underlying message that we're not seeing through all the presentations, is so many of us playing within this field from various different backgrounds, but to achieve the ultimate objective and the success to make this work, we really do need to come together. I think you're right, Shahid, we need much more time. I think for all the sessions we had, this was just a taster, and hopefully the future will hold something more. But moving on to our final session for the day, and not the last one though, I would like to introduce Peter Broderick, who's a chartered accountant and actually lectures in financial reporting at the Nelson Mandela University. Today, Peter will be taking us through something that I know that in every discussion I've been, and we have debated this time and time again. So what is this definition of sustainability? So over to you, Peter, to share with us some of this academic research and perspectives from your side. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jyoti, and good afternoon to all the participants. It's been a great discussion so far, and really enjoyed it. Amazing to hear the different perspectives and the depths that one can take in many dimensions and aspects of sustainability. And so great to have that kind of iron sharpening iron opportunity here, and cross-pollination of the different ideas. So for this final session, I just wanted to speak to you a little bit about a definition for the term sustainability, constructing a globally relevant definition in an organizational reporting context. We can go to the next slide, please. The purpose I thought for today is to explore the definitional challenges relating to sustainability, specifically in an organizational reporting context, to then attempt to construct a comprehensive definition, drawing from existing sources that will be globally relevant in the reporting context, and then discuss the application of such a definition in interpreting sustainability reporting. So that's the plan for today. If we go on to the next slide, we're all familiar that sustainability is a frequently used term. It represents a global call to action, and there are numerous frameworks and standards and initiatives, indexes, and many other things. And yet there's no single common definition for the term sustainability. So that begs the question, how do we align our action behind it? Or how do organizations understand their responsibility for sustainability and to report consistently against it? And how do we make informed decisions for resource allocation ultimately? Next slide, please. And so the issue, as we look at it from academic literature, it confirms that there's a diversity of the concept, a lack of standard terminology and clear definition for this term sustainability in an organizational reporting context and in other contexts as well, scientific, engineering, social sciences. There's a gap in the literature for definitional studies on sustainability, especially current ones. There have been studies on other terms around sustainability, corporate social responsibility, for example, but not specifically on sustainability recently. And so the implication of this issue is that it's difficult for preparers to understand their responsibility for sustainability without a clear definition. To whom are they reporting? Who are their audience and stakeholder? For what? For what areas? With what priorities? And so there can be inconsistency and complexity and ultimately reduced transparency for stakeholders. And then suboptimal decision-making for markets, but for broader society as well. And so if we go to the next slide, a summary of the sustainability reporting landscape globally, not jurisdiction specific, has the emergence of 3 dominant standard setters, each with slightly different priorities. And I've listed here the IFRS Foundation with their ISSB, the GRI, which has been long-standing, the most established, the European Commission with their European reporting standards, sustainability reporting standards, and how they differ in their audience, their directional focus, their core purpose, and also in materiality. One of the points I'm going to be building up to is it really is around the audience. The audience determines the rest of it. So with the IFRS Foundation, it's primarily providers of financial capital. There are other audiences as well, but the objective is around organizational value creation. The GRI for multiple stakeholders and very much sustainable development focused, and the European Commission with a double materiality dual focus. So inside out from an IFRS Foundation perspective, outside in for the IFRS Foundation. So how are the sustainability matters affecting the organization in terms of its risks and opportunities? Whereas the GRI has an inside out focus. How from the inside of an organization is that impacting the outside? And the EC with its dual focus. I've listed a couple of other organizations below as well, much of which is consolidated into the IFRS Foundation, the TCFD, the IRC, and Value Reporting Foundation. This is where we get our acronyms and the alphabet soup. But these 3 kind of dominant camps is what we're seeing in the landscape currently. If we go to the next slide, with this context, I undertook a study to analyze themes and interrelationships within existing explanations, looking at these 3 key standard setters, as well as the academic literature, and what are they saying about sustainability explanations and definitions where they may exist. And from that, to propose, if possible, a globally relevant definition for the term within this reporting context. And the method was primarily a thematic analysis for the academics. So really looking at both standard setter guidance as well as academic literature, pulling that together and extracting themes and interrelationships to determine a consistent definition. The next slide, please. So if we look first at the standard setters, what are some of the key themes that emerge? And in this diagram, we've got the GRI, IFRS Foundation, and European Commission. And distilling the information, I saw 4 key components to the definition. And they are in subheadings above each of the boxes. The application, in other words, what is being done, what is sort of the action, to what dimensions, what topics of sustainability, with what purpose, why, what's the outcome, and then the audience for whom, who are we doing this for. The GRI is all about impact materiality, the impacts of an organization on the economy, environment, and people, affecting sustainable development, and for an audience of impacted stakeholders. The IFRS Foundation is flipped around, still dimensions and application and purpose, but it's all about, in the central box, identifying sustainability-related risks and opportunities and how those affect entity financial value over time. These are generated by interactions with resources and relationships in the value chain. And at that level, one doesn't get a specific view on the dimensions, but if you drill a little deeper, you see that the IFRS Foundation mentions sustainability topics of environment, economy, and what's the other E? And society, sorry, environment, economy, and society. So that's aligned in terms of those dimensions. Also refers to stakeholders. And then the European Commission is really a combination of both of those, the impacts of an entity and the risks and opportunities on an entity applied to ESG topics. So the EC specifically mentions ESG for an outcome and a purpose of impact materiality and financial materiality for a dual audience. So that was coming out of those 3 standard setters. If we go to the next slide, we see coming out of the academic literature, the same broad 4 components of application, dimensions, purpose, and audience. We're able to drill a bit more into the application with the literature around preserving, managing impacts, a balance across dimensions, multi-temporal, so short, medium, and long-term impacts, not exclusively one or another, that it's values-based or has an ethical component, and applying that to environmental, social, and economic dimensions, which came out strongly as a theme. The purpose within the academic literature was all around intergenerational equity and sustainable development. So it had a strong impact materiality perspective from the literature. And I think that speaks to the history of sustainable development and the GRI over many years. And then audience for broad stakeholders that are intergenerational, current and future stakeholders. So on the next slide, if we put that all together, the notable driver of the difference in sustainability definitions is the audience or the stakeholder concept. The audience is in fact the key determinant of the other definitional components of purpose, dimensions, and application. And this predicament of different audiences can be solved or can be kind of advanced by allowing the audience to remain flexible in the overarching definition of sustainability, which users would then intentionally specify as a secondary statement in the individual applications. And in that way, it can accommodate multiple stakeholder needs. So if we see on the next slide, a constructed definition from these sources sustainability, and this is in an organizational reporting context as its delimiter, is the practice of ethically managing impacts and preserving resources and relationships over time across a balance of environmental, social, and economic dimensions to produce long-term equitable value for identified current and future stakeholders. So that's a mouthful, I know, but if you spend some time unpacking each of those statements, and it'd be great to engage on this. You might have others that you'd want to add or maybe take away, but I think each has an underlying explanation. It's practice, it's active. There's an ethical, values-based component. It's active in that it manages impacts and preserves resources and relationships, so not just resources. Over time, that's talking about the multiple periods, the balance across the dimensions, and obviously that balance will be a little different in different jurisdictions. But again, this is a sort of a global, non-jurisdiction specific definition. And then long-term equitable value, so bringing out that sustainable development aspect for current and future stakeholders. So then just quickly, if we take it to the next slide, this proposed definition, which runs down the left-hand side, was aligned with the four main components. There's detailed explanations. Where does governance fit in into sort of more the social aspect of E, S, and E, the references to the different frameworks. And then again on the next slide, another view of just sort of tracking it back to each of the key concepts in the standard setter guidance and literature, and making sure that that's covered off. Then finally, next slide, just sort of to wrap it up and to think about recommendations and contribution. The recommendation is really to ideally adopt and apply for greater consistency, but then also test it and let's take it to the next level of detail. In some recent conversations, there were discussions around what are the boundaries for environment and society, social impacts, and economy. Do we understand economy? It's not the same as just profit for the organization. So to really unpack and understand those, understanding the appropriate balance across the different dimensions for local context, we could unpack that, and then extend the discussion on the selection of stakeholders. So then in terms of contribution and limitations, really it spotlights the directional focus of different framework and standard setters. And that the audience and the stakeholder is really the key issue. Where preparers report against specific frameworks, users can then better interpret their compliance based on the definitional focus that preparers apply in using such a definition. Adoption and consistent use can bring consistency in understanding application, but we need to bear in mind as well, the breadth of the definition does limit its specificity. And in that sense, it obviously doesn't fully solve the stakeholder issue. It requires that a user then does that in their definition. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because it does require in that definition the user to identify those stakeholders. And that makes it very clear then in their reporting. And we do see that. We see it in practice amongst the better reporters, how they do identify their audience right up front in their integrated and sustainability reports. And we want to see more of that. And then finally, it's a framework for academics in teaching on the topic. And Bruce was speaking about that a little bit before, the importance in academia of teaching the right thing. And then as well as in research, a benchmark for studies. So maybe just head back to the slide on the definition, and I will finish with that. I think it's about 2 slides back. If anyone wants to have another view on that, I don't know if there's time for questions, but Otherwise, I thank you for the opportunity. Perhaps just one more back. That's the one. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Peter. Yeah, definitely. I think some great insights. I think you are going to stimulate a great discussion in many forums going forward. It is definitely, I think, something that's been debated and will continue to be debated going forward. This is a journey we are on. So thank you once again for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us, thank you. This brings us to the closure of our program for today. It was my honor to be your program director. And my last job is to hand over back to Imran to give you a vote of thanks and to close. Thank you, Imran.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for still being here. I will close this in just 2 minutes. I want to thank you for being with us for the last 3.5 hours. We had over 220 guests. And without the 220 of you, there would have been no event today. So it is a real pleasure having you here. So we've been on a journey that paints many panels of this landscape. But as I've discovered, this is just the start for me. There's still much more to do. And one of those things is actually to read this document, which is full print of ISSA 5000. So if you're looking for something to take to the beach on the holiday, that's a really good place to start. I hope you appreciated the collection of expert speakers that we had here today and hearing their views. They've been just beyond our wildest expectations. My sense is that the ESG challenges are absolutely immense, but there is every reason for hope, and especially reason for hope for us as accountants and as South Africans with the right tools in the space. Accountants have a role to play, but one of the things that's clear from today's discussion is that our corporate reporting and governance ecosystem in its entirety also has a part to play. I'd like to close now with expressing my special appreciation, firstly to my team here at the IRBA. Ian was the organizer for this event, Ian Mtecha. I'd like to thank him for this. Ian, you're welcome to come on camera if you're still camera ready. Our host and our SSC chair, Jyoti, I'd like to thank her as well for being here. And for the expert way in which she hosted the event, the members of our Sustainability Standing Committee who do the grunt work, the standard setting and writing in this area, and who are going to be very busy over the next 6 months, and every single one of our panelists and presenters for all of these sessions. We had a session today where we had panelists join us from 4 different countries in the world. So that's at 4 different time zones, a lot of effort and a lot of preparation before we got here today in pre-calls. We are indebted to you for what you've brought us. Our CEO, Mr. Nagi, thank you for your keynote address. It's evoked a lot of interest, and really people were pleased to see IRBA's commitment. I also want to thank our many friends. We have friends at SAICA, at the ACCA, at the Pan-African Federation of Accountants, at AFIA, the African Federation of Independent Auditing Regulators. We saw their names on the attendance list. This was really a wonderful team effort to have everybody here. This brings to an end this webinar, but it also brings to an end the series of webinars that we have had over 2024. We've had a webinar on fraud, one on the S&P environment, and now this one on sustainability. I hear in the grapevine that the next big event is a webinar planned for the next quarter, and that we have a technology flavor and particularly the use of AI in audit. We're busy working on the details of it and keep a lookout on the socials for our advertisement around it. In a very large slide, which will play out while we all leave, we have a QR code and links to some relevant resources. You're welcome to take a picture of this so you can scan and use it later. And as I promised you, Ian will make sure that in the next few days, we will hopefully post to all attendees a link to the recording and the presentations that go with it. And also, we're looking forward to preparing some kind of short summary of today's meeting with the help of our editor. This brings us to the end. I'd like to express my sincere appreciation for everyone who's been with us since 9 o'clock this morning. Before you leave, I have one last request. Please go into your chat. Please go into your chat before you leave. You have to give us a present before you leave. And the present we would like from you, if you are in the chat, is we would like you to find an emoji. So the emoji is the smiley face at the bottom of the text box. Go to your emojis and find an emoji that expresses how you feel about today's webinar, the topic of ESG, and the like. And of course, that emoji will be captured in the meeting recording and it'll be there for posterity. So we ask you to click on emoji, see all your emojis, all your GIFs, all your stickers. Let's go crazy. Take your time and leave us with a lovely emoji. That's your gift to us for the event that we've had today. I'm watching you. Be careful about what you post over there. But thank you very, very much. And good afternoon, everyone, for being here. I will keep the channel running for a little while so we capture all the emojis that are coming through. But thank you and have a lovely afternoon. Goodbye.